You've heard the story of Noah's Ark, a great flood, a man chosen by God, animals marching 2 by 2. But what if that's only half the story? What if the flood wasn't just about saving humanity but about stopping something far more terrifying? Ancient texts hinted a hidden war before the waters came, a rebellion not of humans, but of beings called the Nephilim, the hybrid offspring of angels and mortals. And some say the ark was not just a boat for animals, it was a vault, a rescue mission, a prison. Today, we'll uncover the shocking, forgotten side of Noah's story, the part no one dares to tell. Long before the first raindrop touched the ground, the earth was already drowning in something worse than water. It was drowning in corruption, in violence, in something unnatural. The ancient world was not like ours. It was a world where the sky was closer, where the heavens were not silent, and where men were not alone. The guardians of the higher realms, called the Watchers, were supposed to observe. They were meant to guide from a distance, not interfere, but they did interfere. They came down. The texts say they descended upon Mount Hermon in the days when men still remembered the whispers of Eden. These angels made a pact, a secret agreement. They chose to break the boundary between the immortal and the mortal. And once they crossed that line, there was no going back. They took human women. From these unions came something new, something the world had never seen before. They were giants in size, but their physical strength was only part of the terror they brought. The Nephilim carried within them a spirit of rebellion. They were the offspring of heaven's betrayal. With every step they took, the earth trembled. They ruled like kings, but with the cruelty of predators. They devoured resources, enslaved populations, and taught humans the ways of war. Some say they drank blood. Some say they altered animals and corrupted nature itself. The world became a laboratory of perversion. The Watchers didn't stop at creating giants. They revealed forbidden knowledge to humanity: weapons, sorcery, charms, astrologers. They taught men to control life and death, to twist nature, to manipulate the unseen. The balance of the world began to collapse. The air was thick with violence. The ground soaked up the blood of both man and beast. Even the animals became tainted. What was once good became grotesque, and heaven watched. The Creator saw the world unraveling like a scroll burned at the edges. The Watchers had infected the blueprint of creation. If left unchecked, the Nephilim would overrun the earth, perhaps even replace humanity altogether. The very fabric of life was under siege. But why did the Watchers do it? Was it lust that drew them to the daughters of men? Or pride, thinking they could build their own empire apart from God? Were they seduced by the beauty of the earth, forgetting the glory of the heavens? The ancient texts do not give a simple answer. What they do tell us is this: once they crossed the boundary, the infection spread faster than they could control. It was no longer just a problem on earth. It became a cosmic threat. And in the middle of this chaos, there was one man who stood apart. His name was Noah. Noah lived differently. While others bowed to giants or chased forbidden power, Noah walked with God. His bloodline was untainted by angelic corruption. His heart was still aligned with the Creator. He was not perfect, but he was pure in a world that had forgotten what purity even looked like. Then came the warning. One night, perhaps while standing beneath a sky full of strange stars, Noah heard the message. The world would be judged, not just because of human sin, but because of something deeper. The flood would not only wash away wickedness, it would bury the results of heaven's rebellion. The Nephilim, the Watchers, the poisoned world they had built. God gave Noah instructions: build an ark, not just for animals, but to preserve life as it was meant to be, to save a remnant, to protect the last thread of humanity from extinction. Meanwhile, the Watchers panicked. Some of them sent messages to Enoch, Noah's great-grandfather, pleading for mercy. They begged for a second chance. They asked for forgiveness, but the answer was silence. Judgment had already been set into motion. The earth groaned under the weight of the Nephilim. The skies prepared to open. The countdown to destruction had begun. And so, the world before the flood waited, not for rain, but for the collapse of an age. The giants ruled the earth for now, but their time was running out. The end of their kingdom was closer than they knew. The stories passed down through ancient generations speak of a time when giants roamed the earth freely. Not just tall men or exaggerated legends, these were creatures of unimaginable size and strength. The Nephilim were real, and their presence changed everything. Their footsteps carved valleys into the land. Their shadows darkened the mountains. Wherever they went, fear followed. They were born from the union of the Watchers and human women, but they were not fully angel nor fully human. They were something else, something that did not belong. At first, some people admired them. They were seen as demigods, beings of awe and mystery. Kings built monuments in their honor. Entire civilizations submitted to their rule. But admiration turned to terror when the Nephilim's hunger grew beyond control. They did not just eat food, they consumed resources. They devoured entire harvests in days. When the earth no longer satisfied them, they turned on humanity itself. People became prey. Mothers watched their children disappear into the hands of giants. Villages vanished overnight. Forests became wastelands. Rivers ran red. The cries of humanity reached the heavens, but for a time, no answer came. The Nephilim were not the only problem. The Watchers, still roaming the earth, taught mankind forbidden knowledge, secrets of heaven that were never meant for human hands. Weapons were forged from metals unknown to previous generations. Magic was introduced into everyday life. Charms and incantations replaced prayer and trust. Even the art of cosmetics was twisted into deception, teaching women to seduce and manipulate. Knowledge itself became a weapon. The balance of nature collapsed. Animals began to change. Some of the Watchers experimented with creation, twisting species, crossing lines that should have never been crossed. Legends from multiple cultures speak of hybrid creatures, monsters that blurred the lines between man, beast, and spirit. The earth became a laboratory of chaos. And yet, there were still those who resisted. Noah and his family remained separate. They did not follow the ways of the Watchers. They did not worship the giants. While the world bowed to the Nephilim, Noah walked quietly with God. Imagine the isolation he must have felt. Surrounded by a world that had lost its way, Noah chose a different path. People mocked him. They saw his faith as weakness. In their eyes, power was everything. The giants ruled. The Watchers guided. Who was Noah to resist the new order of the world? But Noah held on to something they had forgotten. He remembered the Creator. One day, the warning came again. This time, it was not just a whisper, but a clear command. God told Noah that the end was near, not just for humanity, but for the entire corrupted creation. The Watchers would be punished. The Nephilim would be wiped out. The earth would be cleansed by a flood unlike anything before. Noah was instructed to build the ark. The blueprint was detailed, precise, beyond the technology of his time. This was not just a boat. It was a vessel of preservation, a floating sanctuary to protect life from extinction. But it was also something more. Some ancient writings suggest that the ark had another purpose. It was a safeguard against the spread of corruption. By isolating Noah and his family, God was protecting the pure human bloodline from being erased. If the Nephilim had continued unchecked, there might have been no humans left to save. The ark was not just about animals. It was about resetting the human story. Meanwhile, the Watchers panicked. They knew what was coming. According to the Book of Enoch, they sent Enoch to plead their case before God. They wanted mercy. They asked for forgiveness for crossing the line. They hoped for a second chance, but the answer returned as judgment. The punishment for the Watchers would be severe. They would be bound in the depths, chained in darkness until the final day. Their children, the Nephilim, would be destroyed by the flood. Their legacy would be buried under layers of water and time. Yet the consequences of their rebellion would echo far beyond the flood itself. As Noah hammered the first plank into place, the world continued in its corruption. People laughed at him. They mocked the idea of judgment. Rain had never fallen like this before. Why should they fear a flood? But the giants grew restless. The Nephilim sensed that something was changing. Some of them tried to stop Noah. Some of them tried to build their own defenses against the coming storm. Ancient legends from other cultures speak of towers and strongholds built by giants to survive the flood. They failed. The heavens prepared to open. The foundations of the deep stirred beneath the earth. The clock was ticking. The age of giants was nearing its end, and Noah kept building. The sky remained silent, but the ground knew. Beneath the soil, beneath the mountains and rivers, the earth trembled as if it understood what was coming. Noah worked day after day, building the ark plank by plank. Each hammer strike echoed like a warning, but the world ignored it. The people laughed, the giants mocked, and the watchers watched from the shadows. They knew their time was almost over. The Nephilim grew more violent as the days passed. They sensed the shift in the air. The giants began to turn on each other. Wars broke out between clans of giants, each one desperate to control the remaining resources. Blood of the mighty spilled across the land, mixing with the blood of humans. The corruption deepened. According to ancient traditions, the giants tried to resist the coming flood. Some attempted to build walls to hold back the waters. Others sought magical solutions, using the forbidden knowledge of the Watchers to conjure protection. They failed to understand one simple truth. This was not just a storm, it was divine judgment. The Watchers, once proud and radiant beings of heaven, now found themselves in terror. They had defied the order of creation. They had crossed a line that could not be undone. The fate of their children was sealed, and their own punishment was written in eternity. Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah, was taken up by God before the flood. Some say he was shown visions of the future. Others believe he became a messenger between heaven and the fallen angels. He warned them of their coming judgment, but it was too late. Noah continued his work. The ark took shape, massive and strange to the eyes of the ancient world. Its size alone was enough to draw attention. People came from miles away to stare at it, to scoff, to joke. Some asked Noah what he was building. When he told them, they shook their heads. Rain had never fallen in such a way before. The idea of a world-ending flood sounded like madness. But Noah kept building. Each day, the skies darkened just a little more. The animals began to gather, not by human hand, but by some divine calling. They came in pairs, drawn by something no one could explain. Birds, beasts, creeping things, all moving toward the ark in quiet procession. The people watched this, but even then, they refused to believe. The giants, on the other hand, grew uneasy. Some of them remembered the words of the Watchers. They knew this was not just nature acting randomly. They understood that this was a reckoning. Legends from outside the Bible tell of certain Nephilim trying to escape their fate. Some sought shelter in the mountains. Others tried to flee underground. There are even stories of giants attempting to ascend into the heavens themselves, hoping to outrun judgment. None succeeded. The heavens were preparing for release. The Watchers cried out one last time, but the judgment had been set. According to the ancient texts, God ordered his angels to bind the leaders of the rebellion. They were chained and cast into the depths, locked away in places unknown to humanity. The corruption of the earth had reached its limit. Noah stood at the entrance of the ark, looking at the sky. Perhaps his hands were still stained with the wood and pitch of the vessel he had built. He may have whispered a prayer, or simply breathed deeply, knowing the moment had come. The door of the ark did not close by human hands. According to the account, it was sealed by God himself. The door shut, not as a man would shut a door, but as a final act of mercy and judgment combined. The countdown was over. The first drops of rain began to fall. Not gentle drops, but heavy, relentless sheets of water. The skies broke open. The fountains of the deep water poured from above and below. For the people outside the ark, it was already too late. The giants roared. The Watchers vanished into darkness. Humanity realized, in those final moments, that they had ignored the warnings of the only man left who walked with God. Inside the ark, Noah and his family waited. The sound of the flood grew louder. The waves rose higher. The ancient world of the Nephilim, the Watchers, and the corrupted earth was being erased. But the story of the flood is not just about destruction. It is about something else. It is about a reset, a rescue of what was still good, a protection of what was still pure. The ark floated upon the waters, carrying with it the last hope of humanity. Outside, the world was washed away. Inside, the seeds of a new beginning remained. When people imagine Noah's Ark, they see a giant wooden ship filled with animals. They picture lions and doves, giraffes poking their heads through the beams, and elephants marching 2 by 2. They see a children's story, a floating zoo, a simple act of obedience, rewarded by survival, but they missed the deeper truth. The ark was more than a boat. It was a boundary between two worlds, a vessel of separation, a line drawn in the water between what would be preserved and what would be destroyed. The ancient text suggests that God's instructions to Noah were not random. The dimensions of the ark, its materials, its layers, its sealed structure, were designed for a divine purpose. This was not just about staying afloat. It was about protecting something sacred from corruption. It was a containment chamber for purity in a world collapsing under darkness. The earth outside had become infected. The Nephilim had twisted creation. The Watchers had passed down forbidden knowledge. The bloodline of humanity itself was at risk. If the ark had not been built, there would have been nothing left to save. Inside the ark, however, was something untouched. Noah, his wife, his sons and their wives, 8 souls, carrying the last untainted human lineage, not because they were morally perfect, but because their blood remained pure from the influence of the fallen angels. They were the thread through which God's promise would continue, the seed from which a new world could grow. Some ancient writings go further. The Book of Jubilees and other sources suggest that the ark may have also carried scrolls, relics, and knowledge meant to survive the flood, instructions, warnings, perhaps even records of what had come before, a spiritual vault, not just a physical one. There are theories that say Noah brought more than animals and food. Some believe he carried sacred fire, or fragments of divine light passed down from Enoch. Others claim that he guarded something given by the angels loyal to God. Not every being from heaven had rebelled. Some remained faithful and may have offered protection, insight, even prophecy. Whether these theories hold truth or not, one thing is certain. The ark was never just about survival. It was about preservation, about purpose. The animals entered in pairs, but they too were chosen. Some scholars believe that only uncorrupted species were allowed on board, creatures that had not been altered or twisted by the Nephilim experiments. If the fallen angels had indeed manipulated nature, then the ark had to exclude every beast that had been changed. Only what God originally created could pass through the door. The more one studies the ark, the more it resembles something closer to a temple than a ship. It had structure, layers, order, holiness. It was a place set apart, a sanctuary drifting through the flood of judgment. Outside, the waters rose higher. Cities vanished. Mountains disappeared. The great monuments of the giants were reduced to rubble beneath the waves. Their strength meant nothing now. Their size gave them no advantage. The flood came not as an enemy but as a verdict. Inside the ark, there was stillness. Perhaps Noah walked its halls by lamplight, hearing only the creak of the timbers and the soft breathing of animals. Perhaps he knelt in silence, aware that the world he knew was gone. Everything familiar had been washed away, but he also knew that something greater had been preserved. The ark was hope enclosed in wood and pitch, and though the storm raged outside, within it was the heartbeat of a future not yet written. As the ark floated on the endless waters, a deeper mystery stirred beneath the surface. The flood was not only about wiping out wickedness, it was also about erasing a secret, a forbidden knowledge that had already begun to poison the world. The Watchers had introduced things to humanity that were never meant to be known. They taught men to make weapons sharper than stone, to forge swords from metal no human hand had discovered before. They revealed the secrets of enchantments, how to bend unseen forces to human will. They unlocked the patterns of the stars, not for wonder, but for control. Astrology became a tool of power, not reflection. The cycles of the heavens were used to dominate the earth. Women were taught the art of seduction beyond natural charm. Painted faces, manipulated beauty, crafted appearances, designed not for love but for deception. Magic and vanity blended into a new form of control. Relationships became transactions. Souls became commodities. The Nephilim carried these teachings further. They mixed species. They played with life. They reshaped creation according to their desires. Animals no longer bred as they were made. Giants walked with beasts that had no rightful place in the world. Monsters emerged from laboratories of flesh and bone. The earth itself groaned. The ark, then, was more than a rescue boat. It was a firewall, a safeguard to prevent the spread of this knowledge into the next age. The flood was not just about cleansing sin, it was about sealing away a technology, a spiritual technology that humanity was not ready for. Inside the ark, the knowledge preserved was different. It was holy. It came from God's instruction, not from rebellion. Noah carried with him the ways of righteousness, the traditions of the faithful, the blueprint of how to live according to divine law. Outside the ark, the forbidden teachings sank beneath the waves. But here is where the mystery deepens. Some believe that fragments of this knowledge survived. Some of the watchers were bound and cast into darkness, but their influence did not disappear completely. After the flood, there would be whispers of ancient secrets. Lost civilizations would speak of knowledge too advanced for early humanity, structures too massive, technologies too mysterious. Could it be that some of the forbidden knowledge returned? The flood silenced the voices of the giants, but it could not erase memory. Legends survived, stories passed down from father to son, tales of the time before the waters, when the earth was ruled by mighty beings and angels walked among men. In the ark, Noah carried not only life, but legacy. His family would be the keepers of the sacred memory. They would tell the story of why the flood came, not just to punish but to protect, to ensure that the corruption of the watchers would not fully consume the world. But Noah must have wondered, could this darkness rise again? Would humanity, in time, forget the lessons learned and chase after forbidden things once more? The ark drifted through the floodwaters, silent but heavy with meaning. It was a seed of preservation, yet also a shield against the ancient past. Above the waters, the rain continued to fall. Below, the depths swallowed everything that had been twisted and broken. The ark was a barrier between what had been and what was to come. The ark floated for days that blurred into weeks. Time inside became different from time outside. For Noah and his family, the ark was both safety and confinement. It was salvation and isolation woven together. Outside, the world was gone. Cities disappeared beneath the waves. Mountains vanished under the crushing weight of water. The structures built by giants crumbled into the deep. The towers meant to reach the heavens failed to escape the judgment pouring from the sky. But the ark remained. It rocked on the surface of chaos, guided not by human hands but by the unseen direction of God. Noah could not steer it. He had no control over the currents. His role was obedience, not navigation. Inside the ark, life continued in strange silence. The animals breathed in rhythms unfamiliar to each other. Lions rested beside lambs. Wolves slept beside deer. Predators and prey, together in unnatural peace, waiting for a new beginning. Noah must have wondered about the future. Would the world ever be the same? Could the earth recover from such a cleansing? Was there truly a way back from this cosmic reset? He had seen things no other man had witnessed. He knew the truth behind the flood. It was not just about human sin. It was about stopping a corruption that reached beyond mankind. The giants, the watchers, the polluted bloodlines, all of it had to be buried. Yet Noah also knew that humanity carried within it the seeds of future choices. Even after the flood, men would still have the freedom to choose between obedience and rebellion. The ark became a floating courtroom. Judgment had already been delivered to the world outside, but inside, mercy was unfolding. 8 souls survived, carrying with them the responsibility to rebuild. The weight of that task must have pressed heavily on Noah's heart. As the rain continued, Noah's mind might have wandered to the watchers. He had heard the stories from his great-grandfather Enoch. He knew the details of their fall. He understood the consequences of crossing heavenly boundaries. The watchers were now imprisoned, their fate sealed in chains beneath the earth. Their rebellion was over, but the scars they left would last. Noah also knew about the Nephilim. He had seen them with his own eyes. He had watched their cruelty. He had witnessed their downfall. The flood had swept them away, but the memory of their existence would remain in whispers and warnings passed to the generations that followed. The ark was a reminder of both judgment and mercy. It was a symbol that God could destroy but also preserve, that he could wipe clean but still protect what mattered. When the rain finally stopped, the ark drifted quietly over a world reborn but not yet revealed. The waters covered everything. There were no landmarks, no cities, no footprints of giants, only silence, stretching as far as the eye could see. Inside the ark, Noah waited. The animals waited. humanity waited. The ark was no longer just a boat. It was now the womb of a new world, carrying life through death, preparing for a day when the door would open again. But what would come next would not be simple. The echoes of the past had not vanished completely. The flood had erased the giants, but it had not erased the human heart. And deep within that heart, the same questions remained. Would mankind choose the path of God, or would the forbidden knowledge rise again? For now, the ark floated silently, holding the answer in its walls. The sky changed before the flood came. It was not just the darkening of clouds or the shifting of winds. It was something deeper, something felt in the bones of the earth. The atmosphere thickened as if the universe itself held its breath. Then it happened. The fountains of the deep broke open. Water surged from beneath the ground, rising with violent force. It did not trickle. It roared. Ancient springs burst through the earth's crust, releasing chaos hidden since the dawn of time. At the same moment, the windows of the heavens opened. Rain fell in torrents, not like the gentle showers of spring, but like the release of a cosmic judgment. The sky poured its wrath, and the earth answered with its own. The world became a drowning place. For those outside the ark, panic spread quickly. People who had mocked Noah now clawed for higher ground. Families ran toward mountains. Giants tried to build barricades against the rising tide, but there was no escape. The flood was not just a natural disaster, it was a verdict. The giants, once rulers of the earth, now found themselves powerless. Their size, their strength, their weapons, none of it mattered. The flood was a force that could not be fought. It was not a war they could win with violence or magic. Some tried anyway. Legends tell of Nephilim who battled the waters, striking at the waves as if they were enemies. Others climbed the tallest peaks, hoping to survive by reaching the heavens. But the water rose faster than any mountain could grow. Their cries were swallowed by the storm. The watchers, now bound and awaiting their sentence, watched the destruction from the shadows of the spiritual realm. They saw their children perish. They saw the collapse of the world they had corrupted. Their punishment was not just chains. It was the knowledge of what they had done. The earth trembled beneath the weight of its own cleansing. Seas swallowed forests. Rivers consumed valleys. Deserts became oceans. The floodwaters buried the sins of the world, washing away civilizations that had forgotten their creator. Inside the ark, Noah and his family listened to the sounds of the storm. Perhaps they heard the cries of men outside. Perhaps they heard the collapse of cities, the breaking of mountains, the final roars of dying giants. The walls of the ark held firm, but the sounds of judgment pressed against the wood. Noah had been warned, but nothing could prepare him for this. The ark became a sanctuary in the middle of destruction. It drifted without direction, carried by the hand of God alone. Noah could not see where they were going. He could only trust. Outside, the flood was more than water. It was a spiritual reset, a cosmic judgment on the entire order of creation. The Nephilim had violated the earth. The Watchers had defiled the heavens. Now both realms were being cleansed. The flood was not just about drowning flesh. It was about cutting away corruption. For 40 days and 40 nights, the rain did not stop. The world beneath the waves disappeared. The history of giants, of forbidden knowledge, of angelic rebellion, all sank into the depths. And yet, something remained. The ark floated on, untouched by the judgment beneath it. Inside, the seeds of life were waiting. A new world would rise from the water, but the memory of the old world would never fully disappear. The flood was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of something else. While the waters swallowed the earth, another judgment was unfolding in the unseen world. The Watchers, once radiant beings of heaven, now faced the consequences of their rebellion. They had crossed a boundary that was never meant to be crossed. They had taken human wives, fathered the Nephilim, and corrupted the design of creation. Their actions had infected the earth, twisting the destiny of mankind. Now their sentence was being carried out. According to the Book of Enoch, the archangel Raphael was given a command. He was sent to bind the leaders of the Watchers. Azazel, one of the chief rebels, was seized and cast into a deep, dark place. His punishment was not death, but imprisonment. He was bound hand and foot, cast into the wilderness, covered with jagged rocks, and locked away until the day of final judgment. Other watchers met similar fates. They were chained beneath the earth, in shadowy prisons where no light reaches. These were not metaphors. The texts describe real places of confinement, spiritual realms beneath the surface of the world, where fallen beings are held until the end of days. The chains were not made of human metal. They were divine bindings, fashioned by the authority of heaven itself. No power of earth could break them. The Watchers, once proud and majestic, now lay in silence, their rebellion reduced to regret. They watched their children, the Nephilim, die in the flood. They saw the waters rise over the lands they once ruled. They heard the cries of the giants fade into the depths. This was not just punishment, it was humiliation. The earth was being reset, but the spiritual realms were also being realigned. The heavens reasserted their authority. The Watchers learned a hard lesson. The order of creation was not theirs to alter. The consequences of breaking that order were severe and permanent. Inside the ark, Noah may not have known the details of what happened in the spiritual realms, but he understood the gravity of the moment. He knew that the flood was not only about human wickedness, it was about the cosmic balance between heaven and earth. The floodwaters erased cities, but the binding of the Watchers erased an entire chapter of angelic history. These beings, once sent to guide, had become the source of humanity's downfall. Their teachings led to war, magic, corruption, and unnatural power. Now they were silenced. Yet their story was not fully forgotten. Ancient cultures around the world carried echoes of this event. Myths of gods imprisoned beneath mountains, legends of spirits chained in darkness, different names, but the same memory. The Bible hints at this too. In later scriptures, the apostles refer to angels kept in gloomy dungeons, awaiting judgment. Their rebellion is a warning carved into the fabric of history. The ark drifted quietly above this cosmic unfolding. Noah and his family were preserved, but they carried the weight of knowledge. They were the last witnesses of a world that had collapsed. They had seen the rise and fall of giants. They had known of the Watchers and their fate. Now they floated over a world washed clean, but they also knew what lay beneath the surface. The floodwaters covered the earth, but they could not hide the spiritual scars left behind. And so, the ark became not just a vessel of survival but a witness to judgment, a silent observer of a moment when heaven intervened to restore balance. Above the waters, the ark floated on. Below, the ancient powers were chained in darkness. As the waters covered the highest mountains, the world before the flood vanished. Its cities, its monuments, its towers of pride, all dissolved beneath the waves. But memory is not so easily. Legends have a way of surviving long after the dust settles. Noah's family became the first storytellers of the new world. They carried not just the duty of rebuilding but the responsibility of remembrance. They knew the truth of what had happened. They knew about the Watchers and they had seen the consequences of crossing divine boundaries. Their descendants would hear these stories whispered by firelight. Generations later, the memories would fragment into myths, but the core would remain. Tales of giants roaming the earth, stories of gods punished for their rebellion, shadows of the Watchers lingering in the collective human mind. The flood did not destroy knowledge, it reburied it. As the ark drifted, Noah must have looked across the endless waters and wondered what kind of world would emerge when the flood receded. Would humanity remember the lessons learned, or would they repeat the same mistakes? In time, the waters would lower. The ark would find rest upon Mount Ararat. The door would open. Noah and his family would step onto a cleansed earth, breathing air untouched by the old corruption. But the scars of history were still carried in their hearts. They knew what had been lost, and they knew why. Yet the seeds of rebellion often hide quietly in the human soul. Even after the flood, mankind would rebuild civilizations that chased power over humility, pride over wisdom. Some would search for the forbidden knowledge again, digging into the ruins of the old world, trying to unlock secrets that had been buried on purpose. And sometimes they would find pieces of it. There are ancient texts outside the Bible that suggest remnants of the Nephilim survived, not in physical form, but in spirit. Some believe their presence lingered, influencing kings and rulers in ages to come. Echoes of their power appeared in legends of mighty men, half-gods, and fallen heroes who built kingdoms by force. Others speak of lost artifacts, objects carrying traces of the knowledge once given by the Watchers, symbols etched into stone, hidden scrolls sealed away in secret places, forbidden books that whispered of past glories and dark arts. The flood was a cosmic reset, but it was not a complete erasure. Some things cannot be forgotten. Inside the ark, life had been preserved, but outside, beneath layers of sediment and time, the bones of giants remained buried. Their monuments crumbled, their cities lost to mud and sea, but traces of their existence waited silently beneath the surface of history. Humanity would move forward, but always with the weight of this hidden past pressing just beneath the ground. The ark came to rest, but the echoes of the pre-flood world never fully disappeared. They linger in myths, in scriptures, in the restless search for ancient power. The flood closed a chapter, but it did not burn the pages. And so, even now, humanity wonders. What exactly was lost beneath the waters? What secrets were buried in the depths? And could they rise again? When Noah and his family stepped out of the ark, the air was cleaner, the earth was silent, and the sky was open. The flood had passed, but something lingered beneath the surface of this new world. The giants were gone, but their shadows remained. Time moved forward. Generations came and went. People spread across the earth, building cities once again. But soon, the echoes of the ancient rebellion began to resurface. Across the world, different cultures started telling similar stories. Tales of mighty beings who once ruled the earth. Legends of sky beings who taught humanity forbidden arts. Myths of floods sent by the gods to punish a world that had gone too far. These stories were not isolated. From Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica, from Egypt to the highlands of Tibet, humanity remembered fragments of the same event. Different names, different faces, but a same core memory. Why? Because some truths are too big to forget. In the centuries after the flood, mankind rebuilt not just cities, but also ambitions. They began to look again to the heavens, not in worship but in hunger for power. The Tower of Babel rose from the earth, another attempt to breach the boundary between human and divine. But it was not just the tower that carried echoes of the past, it was the mindset. The same pride that had once infected the Watchers now stirred again in human hearts. Some sought to unlock the ancient knowledge once more. Whispered rumors of old technologies began to circulate. There were stories of secret societies keeping fragments of pre-flood wisdom. The symbols of ancient kings resembled the inscriptions found in the ruins of civilizations long gone, patterns that hinted at a knowledge older than history. In some places, giant bones were discovered, enormous skulls, massive femurs, relics of a forgotten race. These findings were often dismissed, hidden, or reburied. The modern world was not ready to face the implications. What if the stories were true? What if the world before the flood was more advanced, more dangerous, and more spiritually complex than we dare admit? Across time, there have been whispers of Watchers still observing humanity. Not the original fallen angels, but new generations of hidden powers influencing the course of history. Some believe these beings manipulate governments, control knowledge, and guard the secrets of the ancient world. Are they the same Watchers, now in different forms? Or are they human agents, heirs of forbidden knowledge, continuing the rebellion in secret? These are not just myths, they are warnings wrapped in memory. The echoes of the pre-flood world surface in moments of technological leaps, sudden shifts in human capability, and mysterious discoveries that seem out of place in time. Civilizations rise and fall, but the hunger for forbidden power remains. Inside every human generation, there is a choice. Will we walk in alignment with the Creator, or will we chase after the hidden knowledge of the Watchers? The flood was a cosmic judgment, but it was also a lesson humanity keeps forgetting. And now, in this modern age, the same questions return. What have we learned? Or better yet, what have we chosen to ignore? In today's world, technology advances at a speed never seen before. Artificial intelligence, genetic manipulation, quantum computing, space exploration. Humanity is reaching for the stars again, just like it did in the ancient days before the flood. But beneath the surface of progress, an uncomfortable question stirs. Are we rediscovering knowledge, or are we awakening something that was buried long ago? Across hidden corners of the scientific community, there are whispers. Whispers of experiments that blur the line between human and machine, life and artificial life. Gene editing promises to cure disease, but it also opens a door to creating new forms of beings that may no longer fit the definition of human. This is not the first time in history that creation has been tampered with. In the days of Noah, the Watchers did more than teach humanity how to forge weapons. They taught them how to manipulate life itself. The Nephilim were not just giants. They were genetic hybrids, the product of angelic rebellion crossing into human flesh. The experiments that began then have left a mark on human history, and some believe we are picking up where the Watchers left off. The world has forgotten the flood, but it has not forgotten its ambition. There are stories of secret projects, black-budget operations hidden from the public eye, programs that seek to enhance human abilities beyond natural limits, experiments on consciousness transfer, neural implants, and attempts to merge mind with machine. Some of these advances are celebrated as progress, but others are quietly buried under layers of secrecy. It is as if humanity is reaching again for the forbidden fruit. The same knowledge that once led to the downfall of the ancient world is now repackaged in the language of science. Meanwhile, archaeological discoveries continue to puzzle historians. Structures older than recorded history, megalithic stones too large to move with current technology, ancient texts speaking of sky beings, floods, and beings who descended to teach mankind secrets from the stars. Are these just myths? Or are they fragments of a memory too dangerous to fully uncover? Some researchers believe that the so-called missing link in human history is not evolutionary, but technological, that somewhere in the deep past, humanity had access to advanced knowledge that was lost, or rather, deliberately removed from history. The flood was not just about destroying life, it was about resetting the narrative. But the past has a way of returning. In modern culture, we see a fascination with ancient giants, extraterrestrial visitors, and the revival of old magic in new forms. Movies, books, and media constantly revisit these themes. Why? Because deep down, humanity senses there is more to the story. We are drawn to the mysteries of the pre-flood world, because something inside us remembers. The lines between myth and reality blur as we push further into technological and spiritual frontiers. We ask the same questions our ancestors asked. Who are we? Where did we come from? And are we alone? The warnings of Noah's time were not just for his generation. They were for ours. The Watchers are gone, but the knowledge remains in fragments, scattered through time, waiting for someone to pick it up again. And now humanity stands at another crossroads. Will we choose humility, or will we pursue the same path that led to the flood? As humanity stands on the edge of its greatest technological era, the lessons of the flood drift like forgotten warnings in the background. We build faster machines, unlock the code of life, and explore the furthest reaches of the universe. We create artificial minds, alter DNA, and manipulate the building blocks of existence. But in doing so, we echo the same decisions that once brought the world to ruin. The Watchers are no longer here to guide or deceive, but their legacy lives on in the choices humanity makes today. In ancient texts, it is said that the Nephilim will return in the last days, not necessarily as towering giants, but as a spirit of corruption that rises once again, a revival of the same pride and rebellion that led to the flood. It starts with curiosity, but it ends with control. The human desire to transcend limits becomes a doorway to chaos. When we try to become gods without wisdom, we repeat the errors of the past. When we unlock knowledge without humility, we invite disaster. Some believe the warnings are already here. Strange sightings in the sky, unexplained phenomena beneath the earth, genetic experiments happening in secret labs, patterns of ancient knowledge resurfacing in modern science. The same symbols that adorned temples before the flood now appear in new forms, embedded in technology and culture. But this is not just about conspiracies or secret societies. It is about the human heart. The flood was sent because humanity crossed a line. But that line was not just about science or magic. It was about the rejection of the Creator's order. In Noah's time, people laughed at the idea of judgment. They went about their lives, building, marrying, celebrating, while the ark stood unfinished in the background. Warnings were ignored until the rain began to fall. Today, The world continues as if nothing is wrong. We advance, we celebrate progress, we mock ancient stories as myths. But perhaps the myths are not so mythical. Perhaps the story of Noah's Ark is not just a tale of the past, but a mirror of the present, a prophecy in disguise. Jesus himself said that the last days would be like the days of Noah. People would eat and drink, marry and give in marriage, right up until the moment the flood came. This time, it may not be water, but the warning remains the same. There is still time to choose. We can build towers that reach for heaven, or we can build altars that return us to the Creator. We can manipulate life, or we can honor its sacred design. We can follow the path of the Watchers, or we can follow the path of Noah. The ark was not just about survival, it was about trust, and in the end, the question remains. Will we remember why the flood came, or will we invite it again in another form? The choice is ours. We often think of Noah's Ark as a relic of the past, but what if it was never just about the past? What if the ark is a mirror, a reflection of a choice that humanity keeps facing over and over again? The world before the flood was not destroyed because it was weak. It was destroyed because it became too powerful without knowing how to handle that power. Giants walked the earth. Watchers shared forbidden knowledge. Mankind crossed boundaries it did not understand. And then the rain came. Today, the sky looks clear. The oceans are calm. But beneath the surface, the same currents are moving. The same pride, the same hunger for control, the same temptation to become our own gods. Maybe you feel it too. That quiet sense that we are once again standing at the edge of something. A moment where the human story could rise into wisdom or fall back into ruin. The ark was not built in panic. It was built in obedience, piece by piece, in silence, while the world laughed. Maybe this is our time to build something too. Not of wood and nails, but of choices, of humility, of remembering who we are and who we are not. If this story stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Let it plant a seed in someone else's heart. And if you're drawn to ancient mysteries like this one, subscribe. Stay close. There are more stories the world has forgotten, stories that are waiting to be told again before it's too late. Because the flood was not just history, it was a warning, and warnings are meant to be heard.